فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So where we last left off in the Mutn Abu Shujaa in our classes on fiqh, when we talked about the different aspects of purity. So we talked about the water, we talked about tanning, which is about what we can wear. Also we talked about what we can use and what we can't use to make wudu. And yesterday, or the last week's class, we talked about mostly making wudu and like the importance of making wudu, as well as some of the rulings regarding siwak. Now, what we're going to start up today is something that could be, of course, it's usually done before wudu, but this is general bathroom etiquettes. And of course, this is something that is also a part of this because when it comes to wudu and how we make wudu, we also need to make sure that there's no najasa or like this unclean, like some unclean material that is left on the body. When we're and of course when someone uses the restroom, there's going to be parts of najasa that are going to be on the part that it left. So this najasa needs to be cleaned. And of course the normal way that we clean anything is always going to be with water. In general, anything that we clean, the standard is using water to clean that. And he'll talk about that there's a relaxation, or there's a rukhsa, which is something that is made easier for people so that they don't always, like, say if they don't have water and they use the restroom, can they use something other than water to clean? And he'll talk about that it's permissible for them to do this. But this is something that must be done, as the Prophet ﷺ, he in a hadith that's narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ, he was walking by a couple graves, and he said that these two people are being punished in their grave, and they're being punished from something that they wouldn't see as something big. But he said, but it's really actually something that's big. And he said, as for one of them, then he used to walk around spreading gossips and rumors of people, and talking about people behind their back and whatnot. And then for the other person, he used to not protect himself or keep himself from urine. And so this is something, or from his urine. So this is something that they were being punished in the grave from. So what we get from this is this is something that is a serious matter. If someone doesn't protect themselves from the najasa while they're using the restroom, then this is something that could be a cause for someone being punished in the grave. And of course, this affects the validity of someone's salah. If somebody has najasa on their body when they're going to salah, this is something that prevents their salah from being accepted if they have this on them. And so this is why this is mentioned here, as well as other things that go along with the rest of bathroom etiquettes will also be mentioned in this chapter, because of the suitability to talk about these other things as well. And so the author, he says, Fasl, which is a chapter, وَالْإِسْتِنْجَاءُ وَاجِبٌ مِنَ الْبَوْلِ وَالْغَائِطِ. And so he says here that istinjaa is something that's obligatory after urinating or defecating. And this is something that the Sahaba, they were asked by the kuffar, like the disbelievers. They're asked, they said, the kuffar said to them, your prophet teaches you everything. He doesn't leave anything. And he said, yep, of course. He tells us that we should how we should use the restroom, and they gave some of the different things that we'll talk about here. That we should make sure that we clean with at least three wipes, and also that we shouldn't face the Qiblah and these other things, and that they were not shy that the Prophet ﷺ taught them every single aspect about the deen, and even when it comes to the things about the way that we use the restroom. This is something that Allah has given us guidance, that the Prophet ﷺ has given us guidance in how we should do this, and what is the best way. And so this is something that is obligatory, as I mentioned, because of the if somebody leaves it off, that there's a possible punishment for that person in the grave. And then this is something that shows that it's obligatory, and also it's a part of coming up with the conditions for salah. And so, of course, salah is obligatory, so anything that comes into its conditions is also obligatory. And so he says here that Istinjaa is wajib. And Istinjaa usually means cleaning, cleaning the private parts. And as I mentioned, this can be done one of two ways: either water or using something like, normally back in the day they would use rocks, because this was something that was readily available. And anything that, like, such as the toilet paper, we can use this, and this is something that works as long as as long as it actually cleans it, cleans the place. And so the next thing that he says, وَالْأَفْضَلُ أَنْ يَسْتَنْجِيَ بِالْأَحْجَارِ ثُمَّ يُتْبِعَهَا بِالْمَاءِ. And so here he says that it's best to clean with stones, or what's like is what I added here, first, and then follow it up with water. And so this is what he says is the best way to do, because using the stones is a way that gets rid of the actual like pieces of whatever the najas is, and then after that to follow it up with water, because water it cleans everything. So of course, like, if you were to wash something with water, it's different than if you were just to wipe it away with something that is like rough, like toilet paper or like a stone or something of this sort, because there'll be little bits of stuff that is left if you were to wipe something instead of washing it with water. And washing it with water actually cleans the place to where it's in a state of like purity, as opposed to with wiping, there's always going to be little bits and remnants that is left. When it comes to, here he says it's best to clean with stones first and follow it up with water. So it's best to do both, is what he's saying here. Like, to first wipe and then to wash with the water. That's the best thing he says. And then he says, and then ويجوز أن يقتصر على الماء أو على ثلاثة أحجار ينقي بهن المحل. So he says that it's permissible to, or it's okay to use only water, or 3 stones if it cleans the area. And so he says that this is also permissible. If someone wants to just do one or the other, then it's okay for them to use water. And you put water first because this is, in general, everyone, like the scholars have preferred people to use water as opposed to stones, because it actually purifies the makan, like the place, as opposed to if you were to use stones, there'll be the little remnants that are left. But this is a relaxation that is available for people to use, but they need to make sure that they wipe at least 3 times. So even if they use, say they went number 1, they need to wipe. If they're not like washing with water, then they need to use like 3 wipes. Even if they did like number 1, they need to use 3 wipes. Even if they cleaned it on the first wipe, they still need to follow it up with 3. And if they cleaned it on the second wipe, they still need to wipe the 3rd time. And if they've not cleaned it by the 3rd time, then they need to keep wiping until they've cleaned it. And then if they do an odd number, then this is sunnah. And so this is the way that if somebody is wiping, then they need to make sure that they wipe at least 3 times. And then anything over 3 times, they need to have cleaned the place. Like whatever it is, they need to have wiped at least 3 times and also clean the place. And if they go over 3 times, then they need to, then it's sunnah or mustahab for them to make it an odd number of wipes that they did. So this is the sunnah, and this comes in the hadith, because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا اسْتَجْمَرْ فَلْيُوتِرْ. And so, like, if somebody uses like istijmar, which is like using rocks to clean themselves, then they should make it an odd number. And so this is something that the scholars have taken from this, that someone they need to use 3 times, and it's sunnah for them to do it an odd number. And so, of course, using water is better. And for the people, just in general, like if someone is using water, then it's best for them to have cleaned the area before they actually use their hand to wipe anything with the water. So they shouldn't be putting their hand onto something that is like onto any thing that is najas. They shouldn't be wiping with their hand the najas, but rather if they can wipe first with something that's not using like their skin, that it's not touching it, this is what's better. And then after they do that, then they wash with water. This is okay. And also of the things that someone should note when they do this is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يمسكن أحدكم ذكره بيمينه وهو يبول. So if somebody is using the restroom, is using like number one, then he shouldn't hold his private part with his right hand when he's using the restroom. So, and of course, this is the manners when we look at the right hand as opposed to the left hand. The right hand, we use this for things that are like good, or like things that are like good and they're like noble, or like things that are you know, like we eat with our right hand. So like using this while we're using the restroom is not appropriate. So no one should be using the right hand when they're using the restroom to hold themselves when they're doing that, but rather they should either, like, of course, sitting down is preferred, as the Prophet ﷺ, he used to sit down when he would use number one, and this was something that's narrated from Aisha, and this was the normal thing that he would do. And it's permissible for someone to stand and this is like the majority of the scholars to say it's permissible for someone to stand, of course, as long as they're not getting, as long as they're not like putting any, like they're not making a mess, you know, by standing. But it's best for someone to sit down when using even number one. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. And also making sure that they don't use their right hand when they're using the restroom. And also that they shouldn't use their right hand when they're making istinjaa. They shouldn't use their right hand to make istinjaa with. And what this like pretty much looks like, if they're wiping if they're wiping, they shouldn't use their right hand to do the right hand to do the wiping action. And of course, if they need to like clean themselves and they need to move something, and they also need say they're wiping with a toilet paper, they can hold the toilet paper with their right hand and then use their left hand to move their stuff to clean it. And so this is one way to go about cleaning it, so that they're not using their right hand. And so the next thing that the author here, he says, is, and if they do, he says, فَإِنْ أَرَادَ الْاقْتِصَارَ عَلَى أَحْدِهِمَا فَالْمَاءُ أَفْضَلُ. And so he says that if someone wants to do only one of these two options, then using water is better. And as I mentioned, that this is the best way for someone to do this. So of course, if they're using water to pour onto themselves, then they would pour with their right hand and use their left hand to make sure that they get the water into the area, so that they don't ever touch like their private parts with their right hand. And this is also that came in that hadith, and also the next part of that the hadith that he shouldn't hold himself while he's using the restroom with his right hand. Then the next one part in وَلَا يَتَمَسَّحْ بِيَمِينِهِ, and that he shouldn't wipe with his right hand, and so it should be with his left hand that he uses to do the wiping and the cleaning. And of course, using water is better. And of course, people there are different like systems people have set up. Of course, the Muslims are the best when it comes to like always having a system set up to where they can wash with water. If someone wants to use water, then this is of course the best way. And if somebody uses toilet paper, then there is still, like, technically there's still najasa on them, but they are as long as they got off everything that they can do, then the rest of this is forgiven. But it's still technically najasa that is left on them. So that's why using water is better. And then the next thing the author, he says, is some other things to avoid when using the restroom. And as I mentioned, this is one of the ways of doing it. And also one thing for that we'll mention, just a general rule, is that we never want to cause any like problems on other people. Like that the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith that's encompassing in so many different areas, and that darar wala dirar, which is like that there's no causing of harm or reciprocating in harm, going like back and forth with making like harming other people and going back and forth in that. And so anything that causes harm, whether it's for people or whether it's for the environment around us or the animals around us, all of these things are something we want to avoid. And so the author here, he says, وَيَجْتَنِبُ إِسْتِقْبَالَ الْقِبْلَةِ وَاسْتِدْبَارَهَا فِي الصَّحْرَاءِ. And so he says that facing towards things that are, to avoid when using the restroom is facing towards or away from the Qiblah in open spaces. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that don't. He told people, إذا أتيتم الغائط فلا تستقبلوا القبلة ولا تستدبروها ببول أو غائط لكن شرقوا وغربوا. And so this is a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says, if any of you have come to the place where you use the restroom, then don't face the Qibla and don't turn away from it while you're doing number 1 or number 2. But turn to the east or the west. And so this is something that, of course, when they're in Medina, then the Qibla is to the north, is to the it's to the south. And this is something that, like, if they face north or south, there's no or that would be facing the Qibla or facing away from the Qibla. And then if they were to go to the east or the west, then this is for them. But as far as us, like, if we know where the Qibla is, then we shouldn't use the restroom facing towards it from this hadith. The author here, he added in open spaces as like an extra thing. And this is because the Prophet ﷺ was seen, Ibn Umar, one day he went on top of a house and he saw that the Prophet ﷺ was, like, by happenstance, he saw that he was using the restroom facing away from the Kaaba. And so this is this is like a way of seeing that if the Prophet ﷺ, he faced away from the Kaaba while he was inside of like a place and wasn't like in the outdoors, then this is like a relaxation while someone's inside. If they face away from the Kaaba, then this is something that some of the scholars, such as the Shafi'i madhab, have talked about. They say it's permissible in this case. So I'm putting together, because if the Prophet ﷺ did something, the general ruling from it is that it's permissible. So facing away inside of a space is something that's permissible. And that's what he says here. And of course, it's best to never face into or away from the Qibla if you can in your bathroom. So make sure that whenever you're using the restroom, that even if you're inside, not to do this, because many of the scholars have said this is general. And if whenever there is the Qibla, then never face it, or never put your back to the Qibla while you're using the restroom. And then the next thing that the author here, he mentions, is ويجتنب البول والغائط في الماء الراكد. And then he says here, and that also avoid using it in standing water. And so this is something, if you have water, and what he means by standing water is like a body of water. If you say you're walking on a trail or something, and you come across like a puddle, whether it's a puddle or whether it's even like a small little pool of water, then in this standing or this pool of water, then you should avoid urinating in this, because someone could come after you, whether it's a person that wants to make wudu, or it's like an animal that's trying to drink, or someone that needs to use water. And when they find this water, this would be something that if they find this water and someone has used the restroom in this water, then this is something that is wasting a chance for someone to get good use out of this water that otherwise they would have had an example to do, or like a way to use this. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited people from doing this as well. And this is a general thing that someone shouldn't ever destroy something, of course, with using the restroom. They shouldn't, this is water that someone could use, and if he wouldn't have done this in it, it would have been usable water. Now it's not usable water, and it's also something that's also nasty. And so this is something that someone shouldn't do this. And this is something, if someone is wasting money, this is something in general that is prohibited in Islam. So if someone is ruining something that could be money, such as water that's useful, then this is something that is prohibited. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so the next thing that the author here also says is وَتَحْتَ شَجَرَةِ الْمُثْمِرَةِ. And so also under fruit trees, because of course you have a fruit tree and the person has fruit that's on the tree, and the fruit on the tree could fall down any moment. And so if somebody went they went to the bathroom under a tree, and the fruit is going to fall onto that najasa, then this is something that is nasty, one, and also it's something that could be a waste of fruit. It could be something that ruins the fruit. And also, this is also a place. And he says, وَفِي طَرِيقٍ وَالذِّلٍ, which is also in the pathway, or, like in the pathways or roads, and shady areas. And so, like also like under a tree or a fruit tree, or in a shade. In general, like in a hot place, people will come under the shade to look for a place to sit and to hang out or to talk and whatnot, or find like shelter from the sun. So if someone were to use a restroom in these areas, this is something that would hurt the people. And the Prophet ﷺ also said to avoid the la'anin. And so he said, and then he was asked, what are these? And like a la'an is someone who curses, like someone who curses something. In this particular context, then this means like the cause of someone being cursed. And then he was asked by the Sahaba around him, what are these la'anin? And then he said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الذي يتخلى في طريق الناس أو في ظلهم. And so like whoever the things that cause people to be like cursed are the people that use the restroom in the pathways of the people or in the shade. And so this is something that is a cause for someone to, of course, someone, if they did this and someone comes after them, they'll probably curse this person. So this would be a cause if someone were to, if they were to use the restroom in like the street where the pathway where people walk, or in the place where people like come together and sit down and hang out. Then it's a cause for them. Those people who do that and then they're then annoyed by this, then they would be possibly curse these people for what they did. And so of course to avoid this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said to do. And then also he says وَالثُّقْبِ وَلَا يَتَكَلَّمُ عَلَى الْبَوْلِ وَالْغَائِطِ. And so he says وَالثُّقْبِ as well, and which is like a burrow, like which is if you have like the ground, and sometimes you'll have little holes in the ground where it's usually like something where there's whether it's an insect hole or it's a snake hole or some type of small animal hole. All of these things, like no one should use the restroom inside of it because this is somebody's house. You know, like this is the house of like whether it's insects or small animals. Maybe it's a snake. You know, maybe it's a wasp nest. Of course, like that would be very, very dangerous for the person doing it, as well as they're hurting some of the creation of Allah. So of course they shouldn't do that. And so these are things that someone should avoid while they're using the restroom. And so the next thing that the author talks about in regards to etiquette is that talking. وَلَا يَتَكَلَّمُ عَلَى الْبَوْلِ وَالْغَائِطِ. And so that he says that they shouldn't talk while they're using the restroom. So this is also something that the Prophet ﷺ, he says that لا يخرج رجلان يضربان الغائط كاشفين عن عورتهما يتحدثان فإن الله عز وجل يمقت على ذلك. So لا يخرج الرجلان. So he says that there shouldn't be two men shouldn't go out and then use the restroom while they're with each other, with their awra, which is like the private parts exposed, while they're talking with each other, because this is because Allah hates this, and like this is maqt is even more than like karaha, which is like these are two different words for like hate or dislike, but maqt is like a very, very it's one of the most like despised things to Allah. And for someone to do this, and of course this is like talking while someone's using the restroom, even if they were covered, like their aorta was covered, say they were sitting down, they had covered them, like their private parts, they still shouldn't talk. Like this is something they shouldn't do while they're talking. And if they were to uncover, like if they were to sit, like people sometimes do this, they'll be in the stalls together and they'll just be talking back and forth. This is also something they shouldn't do. This is something that is that Allah hates this, and this is something no one should do this, and it's from bad etiquette. And of course, like the same thing is like someone's talking on the phone. Like this is it's very like inappropriate. And so the next thing that the author here mentioned was facing the sun or moon, and which he said وَلَا يَسْتَقْبِلُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ وَلَا يَسْتَدْبِرُهُمَا. And so he says like facing away from the sun or the moon. And he says this because the sun and the moon are of the ayat of Allah, and it's like these are of the signs of Allah. So taking it in that they're from the signs of Allah, then they should be respected, and that the business shouldn't be done to them, or like in towards them or away from them. And this is one of the views of the Shafi'i madhab, and this is one of the weaker of the views. And Imam an-Nawawi, which is of the most knowledgeable people of the Shafi'i madhab, he says that there's no evidence for this prohibition. Like there's no direct evidence for this. This is something that goes off. And if you're going to say it's for the sun or the moon, then anything else that is also from the ayat of Allah, then where do you stop with this? That all of the creation of Allah is the ayat of Allah. And so like to separate this from the other ones, it kind of the argument falls away, and there's no direct hadith talking about the sun or the moon. So the best is that there's no difference for this. Like there's no actual reason for it to be disliked. And also just a couple other things that someone should and take care that are also mentioned in other books of fiqh as well, is that if someone's using the restroom, they shouldn't go into the wind, because of course if they're going into the wind, they could come back onto them, and so they need to make sure that they take care from anything splashing onto them, as well as they should make sure that if they go into the bathroom, that they don't bring a mushaf with them into the bathroom, or anything that has while they're in the actual stall or whatever, or the place that they're in there. If they can, leave it. If they can, of course, if their stuff is safe. If it's not safe, they keep it inside the bag. But anything that has the name of Allah on it or the Prophet ﷺ, like they shouldn't bring this into the bathroom, the place where they're using it, with them, unless there's unless they're scared that someone's going to steal it. And then it should stay in the bag, and it should never open. Like if they have a backpack or whatever, they should keep that in there and keep it as far away from what they're doing as possible. But in general, they shouldn't have like the name of Allah or anything that's showing while they're going into the bathroom. So of course, and sometimes people will have T-shirts and whatnot that have the name of Allah, or they have like the name of the Prophet ﷺ on them. So of course, when they're going to be walking into the bathroom with this is something that's disliked. But then this is also some of the things that go along with when people have different things of the Quran. They should make sure that the Quran never goes into a place that is unbefit for it. And that they make sure that they respect the Quran, and they never do anything with the Quran that is unseemly. And also and to make sure that if someone's using the restroom as well, that they don't use the restroom next to people if they're going to be using the restroom, especially if it's if they're using number 2 or something. Then they should, if they're in they're going on a hike or something and they need to go use the restroom, there's no restrooms around, they shouldn't do this nearby where someone's going to hear what they're doing. They should make sure that they're farther away so no one hears any nasty sounds. And if they're using just number 1 or something, then this is something that if they don't need to necessarily go super far away for that. But of course, no one should ever have their aura, or their private parts, exposed in front of other people. This is something that they should always take care to make sure that their private parts are never exposed in front of people. And so, inshallah, we'll go to the next chapter here. Were there any questions about this last chapter before we move on? So the prohibition is while you're using the bathroom, which is direct, and also the meaning of it goes to inside of the, say if you have a bathroom, you'd have a stall inside the bathroom. So while you're inside the stall, don't say it, and while you're using it, you shouldn't, while there's, and this is assuming that there's najasa in the place that you're speaking, you haven't flushed the toilet and cleaned. But if the place is clean, then there's no problem for someone to say this. And outside the stall, in the rest of the bathroom, if as long as it's a clean place, it's not there's najasa in that place, then there's no problem for someone to say it outside while they're still in there. Of course, if the people say don't say it, then it's best to leave the difference of opinion. But there's no prohibition for someone if they're washing they're making wudhu in the sink, and they're not necessarily in the stall, then to say assalamu alaikum, there's no problem with that. As far as the rulings go, but as far as when it comes to, some people may find that offensive, they may not understand, then this is something that if you leave it off for them, then this is okay, But some people think that if you're in the bathroom itself, you can't speak at all, while you're in the bathroom. But the prohibition goes to while someone is using the restroom. So there is a difference between that. the Prophet ﷺ, while he was using the restroom, someone gave salams on him, and he didn't respond to them until after he had finished, and then he returned the salams. So this is something that, like, the Prophet ﷺ, while he was using the restroom, he wouldn't respond with the salams, which of course, like, responding to the salam is something that's obligatory. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he put it off because this is something that is impermissible for someone to do while they're using the restroom. But afterwards, then it's permissible, as long as I mentioned, the place isn't, like, if it was an outhouse where the najasa is still there, then no. But, like, since we flush the toilet and the najasa goes away, then this is something that after the toilet has been flushed, and it doesn't take the same ruling. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Yeah. And this also goes, like, if you're in the sink and you want to say Bismillah before washing your hands and making wudu, if you want to say Bismillah there. Like, if someone says you can't say it in the bathroom, of course, and they would say you don't say Bismillah if you're in the bathroom, of course. But as I mentioned, if you flush the toilet and there's no najasa, then there's no problem, inshallah. And so the next thing that we're gonna start off with is what breaks wudu, and of course this is a very important chapter, and this is we'll talk about this, and this, of course, we're looking at from the madhab, the Shafi'i madhab here, and I'll mention some of the other ones when it comes to a couple of these issues here. So the author here, he says fasl. He says fasl والذي ينقض الوضوء ستة أشياء. And so he says what breaks, and there's 6 things that break wudu. He says 6 here, and one of the other things said 5. So, but we'll look at it. It's basically the same here. He says ما خرج من السبيلين. And so the first thing he mentions is anything coming out of the 2 private parts. So anything that comes out of either like any one of the 2 private parts, anything coming out of it, whether it's urine or feces, or whether it's something that's not normal, anything that comes out of it, it breaks wudu. And this is something that breaks wudu, and then someone needs to make wudu, of course, before they pray. And this is because that Allah says in the ayat that talks about wudu and whatnot, He says أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ. And so if anyone came from the place where they're using the restroom, they came from, like, the restroom, then this is something that they would need to make wudu from, which is the meaning that is taken from that. And also the next thing that comes into this as well, like using the restroom, and as well as, like, any, like, gas, like gas also breaks the wudu. And of course, this is any gas that is, of course, that And then the general concept when it comes to purity is everything is pure until proven otherwise. It's like it's pure until proven guilty, or like until it's proven that it's not pure. So if somebody is unsure whether or not they broke their wudu, they don't know for sure, like, did I break it or did I not break it? Then as long as they made wudu before, then they go off of that, and they don't worry about something until certain evidence comes to them. Then they are still on their wudu. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned when it comes to somebody was mentioned to him that this person thinks that he broke his wudu while he's in his salah. And the Prophet ﷺ said لا ينصرف, that he shouldn't leave until he has heard something, that he's heard a sound, or that he has smelled something. So, and this is, like, in general, the person shouldn't leave. Of course, if he's in salah, this is something he shouldn't leave salah for this. If he's just has, like, some type of, like, waswasa, like he just has these thoughts, maybe I broke my wudu. If it's a maybe, then this is something that, unless you have certain evidence that proves otherwise, then you're still on wudu. And this is, in general, the principle that you can take that will go with you, is that until there's certain evidence, then you're still on wudu. And sometimes, like, if somebody, like, took a bath or something, then sometimes they will feel something after the bath because of the water or something. Maybe that they broke wudu. But if they know that this isn't actually me doing it, just feeling a feeling of that won't actually be something that takes them out of their salah. But rather, they need to be certain that this is something that broke their wudu. And this is a general concept when it comes to wudu, that certainty is what we look at. And as long as someone made wudu in the past, then they're still upon that impurity that they made in the past until proven otherwise. And so he says anything coming out of the two private parts, of course, that's any solids, liquids, or gases. And so the next one, which is that he mentions here, is وَالنَّوْمِ وَالنَّوْمِ عَلَى غَيْرِ هَيْئَةِ الْمُتَمَكَّنِ. And so he says, and sleep for the one who's not firmly seated on the ground, or like I said ground here because this is what's like mentioned in the hadith. But also, if someone's firmly seated on a chair, like they're firmly uprighted and their buttocks are firmly seated on the chair, then this is something, if they fall asleep while they're in the chair and then they wake up, as long as they're still in the same state and they're still sitting down like this, then they don't need to make wudu, because the chances are of them like breaking their wudu while they were firmly seated like this are very, 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 very slim. You know, if someone's like seated in this way. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that he delayed the salah for Salat al-Isha, and while he delayed the salah for Isha, people were sitting in the masjid waiting for him, and they fell asleep. And like a lot of them, like their heads were nodding off to sleep while they were sitting. And then when they woke up, then they prayed right away without making wudu. And so the scholars, looking at this hadith, as well as other hadith that show that, like, of course, like someone sleeping is something that breaks wudu, then they put these two together and they see that for someone who's sleeping in general in a way that's not like this, it breaks wudu. And if somebody is sleeping whether firmly seated on the ground, then this is something that doesn't break their wudu because of that. And of course, if someone tells them you broke wudu while you're there and they heard something, then of course that broke wudu. And so this is something that this is the view of the Madhab Shafi'i. For someone who's seated firmly on the ground with like their buttocks firmly on a seat or ground, then this is something that doesn't break their wudu. If they're on their side, this breaks wudu. If they actually went to sleep to a point where their consciousness was gone, like some people, they have like a light sleep, which they still hear the things around them and they're still somewhat aware of what's going on around them, but they're not totally there. Like this is something that until their consciousness is totally left, then they haven't like their wudu is not broken until they've come to a certain become a real state of sleep. But someone who's just kind of nodding off, but they still hear what's around them and they're resting, then this wouldn't break wudu. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And the next thing that he says here is in وَزَوَالُ الْعَقْلِ بِسُكْرِ الْمَرَضِ. And so if he said here losing awareness, like from intoxication or illness, or like fainting or insanity. And so if he would have said that losing awareness at the beginning, they would have encompassed sleep as well. Because all of these, losing awareness, whether it's from sleep or whether it's from someone, if someone was intoxicated, of course no one should be getting intoxicated purposefully. But say if it happened, this would also be something that breaks someone's wudu, because chances are when someone lost their mind or like their awareness and whatnot, from whether it's intoxication or if someone's sick or something, the chances are that they broke their wudu. And and since they can't prove it, the overwhelming chances are that they broke their wudu, such as like fainting or insanity. All of these, they fall into the same category where they need to make wudu, because this is normally a place where someone would have broken their wudu. And also, we'll talk about it, that it's also sunnah for them to make ghusl as well, if they like lost their consciousness, like if they totally lost their consciousness or fainted and whatnot. And this is something the Prophet ﷺ did when he was on his deathbed and going through a lot of sicknesses. He fainted multiple times, and every time after he fainted, before going to pray, he had them make a bath for him to make ghusl before that. And so this is something else which is a sunnah, because he didn't command it, but rather it's something that he did for himself. And so then, so this losing awareness is something that would cause someone to need to make wudu again. And then the next thing he says here, وَلَمْسُ الرَّجُلِ الْمَرْأَةَ الْأَجْنَبِيَّةَ مِنْ غَيْرِ حَائِلٍ. And so he says here, in that touching, like skin-to-skin contact, this is like touching skin-to-skin contact from a man to a woman that aren't mahrem. And a mahrem is someone who is permanently prohibited person, like a permanently prohibited person from marriage. So somebody that you're not allowed to marry them in a permanent sense, such as like a mother or a mother-in-law or such as a daughter, or any of like your granddaughters or whatever, like all of these people or sister, like these are someone that you can't ever marry. This is a mahrem, and so they have their they have special rulings regarding them. Like you can sit alone with them, you can talk with them, and like the skin to skin contact is something that normally there's no from a normal person there's never going to be any like shahwa or desire that comes from that. And this is something that, in general, this wouldn't be something that breaks the wudu. But the madhab of Shafi'i is that any skin-to-skin contact from a man to a woman that aren't mahram, so even like someone who's married, like if they give their wife a kiss before going to the masjid, then the madhab of Shafi'i is that this person needs to go make wudu before they pray, and so this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, and I'll explain it first, and I'll talk about some of the views afterwards. When it comes to this in the evidence. But also if someone were to have, like, they were just to brush up against a woman, and they know that they brushed up their skin against another, the woman of another, like another skin of their woman, say it's their wife, or someone, and when they're giving them change from here to there, and they touch skin to skin, then this is something that on the madhab of Shafi'i, they need to break, or they need to go make wudu before they pray, because this broke their wudu. And the evidence for this, that that is the evidence that the Shafi'i, the madhab Shafi'i uses, as well as Shafi'i himself, is that when Allah mentioned the things that break wudu, Allah mentioned أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء. And also in another qira'ah, أَوْ لَمَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء. And these are two different ways, and of course, like, there's different ways of reciting the Quran. And the one which is lamasa, mulamasa, this is something that is referring to touching back and forth. And so this is, in like, it's the reality of the sense, it talks about touching back and forth. But a lot of the scholars, and of course this is the view of some of the Sahaba as well, is that this touching back and forth is referring to actual, like, jima', which is like actual intercourse. It's not referring to the touching beforehand, but rather it's talking about something that's around it, without talking about the subject in and of itself, because this is a part of like the eloquency of the Quran, and that Allah doesn't necessarily talk in a vulgar sense. And so this is something that, instead of saying, and if you've touched, instead of like saying if you've had sex with women, and then you should make wudu, then, or of course this is ghusl in this case, but instead of saying that, Allah said if you've touched women, and this is like a way of saying something without actually saying what is the real intended meaning, but it's understood from the context. And so many of the scholars said this is actually like, this is jima', like this is referring to intercourse, it's not referring to touching. But the other, there's another reading of the Quran which is also mutawatir, like it's accepted, which is lamastumun nisa, which is also touch, like mulamasa is like going back and forth and touching. Okay, maybe that's something referring to jima', but like, or if you touched nisa, which is like women, then this is something that when they put these two together, the Shafi'i madhab is that this is referring to something that breaks wudu, and that this person needs to make it. Of course, there's other hadith that kind of like putting it together, all the evidence. And in general, we always put together all the evidence. We never leave out any evidence. And this is a general concept of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We hold is that any evidence that comes in any place, we take it all and put it together and see how it fits in together, and we don't leave out evidence. And so the other scholars, they talk about that the Prophet ﷺ, and this is like in a hadith that's in Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ was praying, and that Aisha touched his ankle, or was like felt around in the darkness to see if the Prophet ﷺ was with him, and touched his ankle while he was in sujood. And so she found him while he was in sujood and touched his ankle. And so this is evidence that the people that say no, it doesn't break wudu, just the bare touching, but rather it's just the jima'. They use this as evidence. And the Shafi'i, they say maybe he was wearing socks, or maybe there's something between her hand and the ankle. And because there's a possibility, it can't be used as evidence. And this is a difference of opinion that goes into like usul fiqh. And also there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ used to, that Aisha, she narrates, that the Prophet ﷺ used to kiss some of his wives before going out to salah, and then he would not make wudu afterwards. And so this hadith, the majority of like the Shafi'i madhab, and is like filled with scholars of hadith, and they look at this hadith and they say that there's problems with this hadith. And yes, there are things in the hadith that like when someone looks at the chain of narration and whatnot, there are issues that they found, and so they said this hadith can't be used for evidence. And like some of the other scholars say, no, this hadith is actually like this is a good hadith and it's sound, like, such as Shaykh al-Albani. He mentions that this hadith is like it's sound and it's a hasan hadith because of the other evidences of putting the different hadiths together from the different ways that it comes in. And so he says this is something that is hadith is usable for evidence. And if you take this hadith and you take the hadith that this hadith couldn't be understood in any way except that that like it's permissible for someone to touch their wife, or someone in this case like to kiss their wife and then go and pray without wudu. And this is something the Imam Shafi'i, he says, if the hadith is authentic, then this is my madhab. And so basically he based the madhab off of what the hadiths that came to him, if they're authentic, how they came to him, and if it was in another way, then his madhab would always follow the hadith. And so if this hadith is like authentic, then of course like this would mean that it doesn't break wudu, just the skin-to-skin contact, but rather the ayah is talking about like intercourse. And Allah knows best. But this is the view, like this view is the view of many of the like Ibn Uthaymeen, like the modern day scholars, and also like the scholars of the Ahnaf, like the Hanafi scholars. They also view that like touching a woman doesn't break wudu in any way, shape, or form, unless the touching afterwards like resulted in someone having some type of medhi, or like something came out of them, like from being aroused or something. Then in this case, that thing that came out of them from being aroused would be the thing that broke their wudu, not the actual touching in and of itself. And Allah knows best. And then the last part here, and the last one that he mentions here, is وَمَسُّ الْفَرْجِ الْآدَمِ بِبَاطِنِ الْكَفِّ. And so he also says that that if someone touches, and there's a difference between lamps and mess. And this in like lamps is something that's more general, such as like touching like this is lamps, but this wouldn't be considered mess. And he says here, and touching the human private parts with the palm is, he says mess, which is like touching, which would be the inside of the palm. So if someone like grabbed something or felt something with their hand, the inside of their hand, this would be considered mess. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, من مس فرجه أو ذكره فليتوضأ. And so like if someone has touched his private part, then he needs to make wudu. And so this is like the dhakar and farj, it's basically the same thing, referring to the one private part for the person. And so he says here that if someone has touched their private part, then they need to make wudu here. And also this is the same as far as like touching, whether it's the front or the back part. So whether it's both of the private parts, if he's touched either one of these two, then this is a thing that he needs to make wudu with. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Are there any questions about what we went over here, or something that's unclear, or anything here? And so the next, moving forward, and of course, like in general, the difference of opinion when it comes to like the madhab of Shafi'i, sometimes people find it very hard with the skin-to-skin contact from a man to woman that are mahrem. Like this is something a lot of people, they find it like as a hardship. And so if you were to take the madhab that it doesn't break wudu, then this is something that there's a lot of evidence on that, and there's many scholars that have talked about and given this this ruling. This is something that there's a strong view for this, and this is something that can make things much easier for people, especially if somebody is making tawaf around the Kaaba. So if they're making tawaf, and it's almost impossible that they're not going to bump into somebody, that is like to bump into someone's hand or something. And this is something that very for someone to make the tawaf on the madhab of Shafi'i is very difficult in this day and age. And so this is something, of course, like following someone who has the other opinion. It's something that's permissible, And in this particular area, there's a lot of evidence on both sides, but of course on the side that it doesn't break, looking into the different hadith that have come in that sense. Wallahu alam. So the next thing that he goes into is a chapter which talks about the things that make someone have to make ghusl. So he talks about what breaks wudu and what breaks the bigger purity, which is the which needs to have a ghusl to get rid of that major impurity. And so he says here, fasl وَالَّذِي يُجِبُ الْغُسْلَ سِتَّةُ أَشْيَاء. So he says, and there's 6 things that make ghusl obligatory. And he says, ثَلَاثَةٌ تَشْتَرِكُ فِيهَا الرِّجَالُ وَالنِّسَاءُ. And so he says that 3 of them are shared between men and women. And then he says, and they are وَهِيَ الْتِقَاءُ الْخِتَانَيْنِ وَإِنزَالُ الْمَنِيِّ والموت. And so he says here that these 3 things that are shared between the men and women when it comes to making what makes ghusl obligatory on them is 1, intercourse. So intercourse, this entails the ghusl from it. And of course this goes when any of the actual part of intercourse, when something actually, like the head is lost inside of the place. When this happens, this is what actually that causes the actual ghusl to be obligatory. And if something is just touching, then unless it actually enters, there's no ghusl that is obligated from that. And so this is something, of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he in different hadiths, he said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا جَلَسَ بَيْنَ شُعَابِهَا الْأَرْبَعَ ثُمَّ جَهَدَهَا فَقَدْ وَجَبَ الْغُسْلُ. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, if he sat between like the 4 limbs, or like in the it's a kinaya, which is like a way of saying intercourse without saying it. ثُمَّ جَهَدَهَا, and then and took care of his business, فَقَدْ وَجَبَ الْغُسْلُ, then this is obligatory. So if he actually had like this sex or intercourse, then it's obligatory for him to have ghusl. And then he also said at the end of it, وَإِن لَمْ يُنزِلْ, even if he didn't ejaculate. And so like this is the hadith that is like the basis for this. And of course there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, which was in the ma'u min al-ma', which is that water is from water. So which means that any which is this next the next part of it, which is the inzal, which is the discharge of semen. Like any time that the semen is discharged, then it causes ghusl. And this is something that came in a hadith. And the understanding from this hadith, from like its linguistic structure, is that this is the only time that ghusl is obligatory. This is like one of the ways. And this was something that some of the Sahaba, they thought that if someone had intercourse but they didn't ejaculate, then it wasn't obligatory for them to make ghusl. And this was a difference of opinion until the hadith reached them that I mentioned here first, from Abi Hurairah, and also Aisha. She mentioned this hadith as well, in a very clear sense, that is if the person, even if the person doesn't have the ejaculation but they have intercourse, then it's obligatory. And also if they don't have intercourse and there is the ejaculation, whether it's from like a wet dream, which of course there's no problem with that, but or if it's from someone doing something and then making themselves ejaculate, which is impermissible, like masturbation is impermissible, then this is something that all of this makes ghusl obligatory. So whether it's this or that, it makes ghusl obligatory. And yes, there was a difference of opinion in the Sahaba until the hadith reached them. And once the hadith reached them, then pretty much there's no difference of opinion in that issue. That intercourse, regardless of whether there's ejaculation, causes obligates ghusl, as well as discharging of semen, also obligates ghusl. And so these are things, of course, men and women, they're all shared in this sense. And of course, like if a woman has a wet dream, this is something that it's possible. And one of the women, they asked the Prophet ﷺ about this, that if a woman has a wet dream, then does she have to make ghusl? And the Prophet ﷺ said, if she sees the water, like it's an actual wet dream, or she saw water that came out, referring to like the discharge of semen, then it's obligatory. And then the last thing that it's mentioned that these are both between men and women is death. Of course, and anyone who dies, like this is something, of course, they don't have to wash themselves when they're dead. They've done their thing. But upon the Ummah and the Muslims around them is for them to wash their body before they're like covered and buried. And this is a whole other subject. But in general, like this is something that obligates ghusl. He mentions it here. And of course, when someone dies, then this is something they will need to have a ghusl made on them, and someone else will wash their body, of course, in an appropriate way without exposing any of their like private parts and whatnot, in a respectable manner. And so then and then he says, and 3 are specific to women. And so there's 3 extra things that are specific for women. And of these 3 here, he says, وَثَلَاثَةٌ تَخْتَصُّ بِهَا النِّسَاء, which they're specific for women. And he says, وَهِيَ الْحَيْضُ وَالنِّفَاسُ وَالْوِلَادَةُ. And so he says here, there are 3 things here. And he says 1, which is menstruation. So the menstruation, when the woman is finished with her period, then she needs to make ghusl. And also the postpartum bleeding, which is a nifas, which is postpartum bleeding that happens after someone has given birth. And they need to make ghusl once this is finished. And there's special like rulings regarding this that comes up at towards the end of this book, or like kitab. And then also giving birth. And so the Shafi'is, they say giving birth, when this most of the time would be covered with the postpartum bleeding, because nobody really gives birth except there's postpartum bleeding as well, even if it's a little bit. But they say giving birth as well. And this is something that is kind of a hypothetical scenario, because of course anyone that gives birth is probably they're gonna have postpartum bleeding, and whenever that ends, that's the thing that causes them to make ghusl. And so these are 3 things that are specific for women when they make ghusl. And then the next part that we'll go into next week, inshallah, we'll talk about how ghusl is made. And in general, ghusl is made just as like an overview, is that water needs to reach all of the body from the outside. Like all of the skin of the body, water needs to reach it, as well as the hairs on the body, like from the hairs of the head and whatnot, water needs to reach all of it. And this is the thing that needs to be done for ghusl, of course, while intending it, and making sure that anything that's on the body that's najis, it's also removed. And if we want, we can, we'll talk about the rest of ghusl. We'll go into more detail, inshallah, in the next class. Allah ta'ala, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.